Hey everybody! It seems like I always underestimate the amount of time that it takes me to drink or take a drink from my cup, and I get caught like mid gulp when the stream goes live. And I've listened to some of the live streams just a little bit, and I'm like swallowing, and it just it always catches me right as it goes live because I never know. Like when I click the button to go live, there's this delay and then it goes live and it's never consistent. So anyway, hope everybody's doing well. I actually worked out late tonight, and I took a shower, and I was doing a few things, so I thought I would do a live stream. It's not going to be a really long one, or at least I don't anticipate it being. But what I want to do is there were a few things that were on my mind I wanted to share. First of all, I wanted to talk a little bit. I updated a page on my website, and I spent probably, I probably spent 20 hours updating it and really expanding it quite a bit. And I'm going to share a link like in the comments so you guys can check it out if you want to. But it covers a tremendous amount of information from on how I should say, what is the functional medicine approach to Hashimoto's. And that's, if we're going to look at like what I do with people and how I work with people, what I try to do is take what's called a systems biology approach or a systems-based approach, which I really address this in the website and on the webpage to try to help you understand the various approaches that are out there. And there are many. And I think that's one of the things that's most confusing and that's most difficult for people to understand is when they hear someone like me talk, they're like, what do you do? And so I guess the closest thing to what I do with people is we do what's called a systems-based approach. You look at multiple systems of the body. You try to consider every system, and you try to correlate the person's symptoms with laboratory diagnostic testing to determine what might be breaking down or what might be activating the immune system or causing the immune system to dysregulate or kind of go haywire and attack the body, right? And we try to unwind the autoimmune process. And I use you have to look at all systems of the body because they're all involved in this process. And I go into detail some of the questions that you should really be contemplating if you're trying to find someone to help you on the website, because there's just a tremendous variety. So I'm very much diagnostic, lab-based focused because I like it. I think it's repeatable, right? So we can repeat the testing and get the same results over and over. So I like things that are quantitative and that are repeatable. And there are a lot of approaches that don't even use any lab testing at all. It might just use questionnaires, or they might use something like muscle testing, which are very subjective, at least in my experience. And I'm not saying that those things are right or wrong. It's just different than what I do. And not many people understand that if you're looking up someone that says they do, for example, like functional medicine, you don't know what you're getting, right? You really don't know. You might be going someplace that does muscle testing and they say we do, functional medicine. And it's really just a nutritional based approach with, a different strategy. So you might not be aware of that. So I try to explain that there are all these different approaches out there that will sometimes fall under that umbrella term because there's no like standardized approach or even restrictions on who can say that they do one thing or the other, functional medicine or integrative medicine, or there's really no there's no one standard or standard that has to be met for you to use those terms. So I try to share like ways for you to think about this and frameworks to look at it, and so that you can make decisions that are best for you if you're trying to find someone to help you. And I think it's really important that you do find someone to help you if it's an option for you, because I think that it's, after working with people as I have over the years and experiencing, these problems myself with autoimmunity, you learn a lot of lessons, and you can give people a lot of insight, seeing things over and over and over again, you start to see patterns that develop and emerge, and you can help guide people. I mean, that's part of what it means to try to help someone as a practitioner, doctor, whatnot. It's to guide them, right? To give them better direction. So anyway, I wanted to mention that web page covers a lot of information. I go into the topic we're going to talk about, which is Hashimoto's medication. I talk about thyroid hormones, synthetic, natural desiccated or bioidentical thyroid hormone replacement therapy. I talk about LDN, which is low dose naltrexone that's sometimes used. And I go through information on gluten and Hashimoto's connection. I help you. And I have probably, 40 or 50 literature references. So links out to a lot of different places so that you can find resources to help yourself and to kind of understand some of the information that I'm sharing there. And it's really also the way that I can substantiate it and back it up with some literature. So I hope that's helpful. If you guys get a chance, I posted a link to it in, hi Anna, hey Vaughn. I posted a link to it in the comments here. I don't know, actually that's probably on Facebook and I think also on YouTube. But so those are there. If you want to check them out, that would be, you can look for yourself and hopefully it helps you, gives you some direction. The other thing is that we are the Transformation Challenge, which is the challenge that we're offering, which basically takes the dietary, lifestyle, and nutritional supplementation recommendations that I've seen work with people over and over again, kind of going back to seeing patterns that tend to reemerge. We tried to, over the years, we've seen patterns emerge, my staff and I, in our patients and clients that we work with. And we tried to put together like a strategy to help people that maybe couldn't get access to someone that does functional medicine or that couldn't work with us. We tried to put this information together in a format to make it, just the best that we possibly could. And we're continuously trying to improve it, and we update it. I think this is the 4th revision of the diet, lifestyle, and nutritional supplementation strategies that I recommend. And we try to do it in such a way that it is easy to use. It's available to anyone online, and it's very, very cheap. So we give the Transformation Challenge for $1. The issue with that is that right now we're to a point where this is our 3rd time running this newest version, because it hasn't been available for like a year or maybe longer than that. And then I guess about 3 months ago, we started offering it because I updated it. And we started offering it, and now we have so many people that are in our group that it's we're trying. We've been enrolling people in classes, like starting together, and it's kind of becoming a bit overwhelming. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if we can't make it just available. So it's not, because what we do is we close the enrollment with the class, but I'm going to see if we can't just make it so it's kind of perpetual. So if you wanted to join it or something, anyone could get access to it at any time, but we're probably not going to have another enrollment. Our enrollment for our 3rd class closes tomorrow. So it's tomorrow, probably at 12 or something. So at midnight our time, I think, is probably when it closes. But if you're interested in it, it's $1. If you wanted to, what we offer with that is you get a meal plan and all kinds of information. You can check it out if you go to thyroidprogram.com. You can take a look at it, and I'll post it in there. Hopefully that's correct. And you can just go check it out. It's $1. If you wanted to get like an additional meal plan, we give you a meal plan. We give you, there's everything that you need is in that $1. Even access to our closed Facebook group for the people that have joined that program. You can join a support group. It's part of it for $1. Now you can get an additional meal plan, 4-week meal plan that we've developed, which includes shopping lists. That is $9.99 if you want it. It's optional. And then you can also get access to our special programs subscription, which also gives you, if you're in the continental US, you can join this. And you can join this if you're in the UK or Australia or anywhere else in the world, but you just can't get access to the supplement discount. Our special programs membership includes our detoxification program, which is the 2nd step I recommend after the Transformation Challenge. It includes our, which is a full full program. It's a full program. I designed it. It's pretty amazing. I'm pretty proud of that program. It's I think it's very good. There's also our Mastering Leaky Gut programs in there, several guidebooks on specific topics, just a few pages that can be helpful, on food sensitivity protocols and a few things like that that you can have access to. But there's also a supplement discount where you can save 20% on the supplements that we have through our online pharmacy. So it actually saves people that are buying supplements typically a lot of money, and you can get, a lot of physician-only supplements there. But anyway, you can check that out if you're interested in it. It's just thyroidprogram.com, and that closes tomorrow. What I really want to talk about, though, this evening is Hashimoto's, and is there a medication for Hashimoto's? And do you know? Can anyone tell me, do you know if, can anyone tell me, is there a medication for Hashimoto's? And I'll wait. If anyone wants to post, I'll wait a second. Just see, is there a medication for Hashimoto's? If you've already visited my website that we updated that I mentioned earlier, I posted a link to it in the comments that should show up on Facebook and YouTube. So don't cheat. if you already visited the website and you read the section on this. Diane, you were the first one. Diane says, no. Stephanie, hey, Stephanie, hope you're doing well. Stephanie says, no, there's not. Okay. So, why is there no medication for Hashimoto's then? So Hashimoto's autoimmune thyroid, it's an autoimmune condition where the immune system attacks the thyroid. Okay. So most people though, it's interesting when they get Hashimoto's, I mean, listen, I get it. Most people that get Hashimoto's, they go to their doctor and they get a diagnosis. Most doctors don't check for Hashimoto's. They go because they're hypothyroid. They have a low thyroid, and they go to their doctor, and rarely the doctor will check thyroid antibodies. Usually they just check TSH and see if TSH, the level is high. If it's high and it's above the lab range, then they'll diagnose you as hypothyroid, meaning low thyroid function. Okay. But sometimes doctors will check the thyroid antibodies and you'll get diagnosed with Hashimoto's. Now, so some people, they don't realize that they think that the thyroid hormone replacement, so the thyroid hormone is the treatment, right? But the fact is that it's not. It's not the treatment, because there is no treatment. There is no medication for Hashimoto's, okay? Because why? Because the thyroid hormone replacement is for the side effect, for the side effect of Hashimoto's. Hashimoto's, the immune system is again an immune system. It's an autoimmune disease, right? So the immune system's attacking the thyroid and destroying the thyroid tissue, resulting in the thyroid getting smaller or scarring and destroying the cells of the thyroid, decreasing the thyroid's ability to release thyroid hormone. Okay, so then as the thyroid hormone levels drop due to the ongoing autoimmune process, it needs to be replaced. So then they give the thyroid hormone replacement. So the doctors are actually giving the thyroid hormone not as a treatment for Hashimoto's, but as a treatment for the progressive destruction of the thyroid, for the side effects of the autoimmune process. And a lot of people don't understand that actually the actual cause of the hypothyroidism, of the low thyroid, is not being treated, because there's no medication for it. There's none, right? There's none. And it's not that the doctors wouldn't give you a medication. There's nothing that exists, because the autoimmune conditions where there is a medication tend to be autoimmune conditions that have and cause massive tissue destruction, like rheumatoid arthritis, or something that is very severely debilitating, like multiple sclerosis or lupus, right? Some of these other types of autoimmune conditions, what will be done is that a series of a few different medications will typically be used. Steroids, anti-inflammatories in some cases, and immune suppressing drugs or biologics. Now, those medications are used in those more debilitating, more significant tissue destruction types of autoimmune conditions, because what they do is they actually suppress the immune system. right? So they suppress it and decrease your body's ability to destroy your tissues. So it's basically shutting down the immune system. And that can really preserve people's tissues and help them to not have as much pain. But those are definitely not without consequence because they're suppressing the immune system, and that shuts off surveillance for cancer. And so the secondary cancers can develop, and they're very serious, very powerful medications. And I'm glad that we have them available, but we want to do everything that we can to not have to utilize those things if possible. Right, if possible. Now, the issue with Hashimoto's is that because it's not considered as severe as those autoimmune conditions, and it doesn't cause as much tissue destruction, it is those medications are not used. Right, so because listen, most people that have Hashimoto's don't know they have it. Again, so most people that actually have Hashimoto's, they don't even know they have it because they're rather asymptomatic, or they don't understand that what they're feeling and experiencing is actually being caused by that autoimmune process. And if you have hypothyroidism, if you have a low thyroid, then you have about a 90% chance, 90%, like 9 out of 10 people that have hypothyroidism, it's believed, maybe even higher, are believed to have that low thyroid function because of Hashimoto's, because of an autoimmune process against the thyroid. So it's like you're definitely more likely than not to have Hashimoto's, right? If you have a low thyroid function, but most people have no idea, and so there's no medication for it. However, there are things that can be done to support it, and there's a lot of literature that's actually coming out that shows that there absolutely are things that we can do for the immune system. And this is something that, like, clinically, the things that we do when we're working with autoimmunity, or I'll say, let me speak for myself here. The things that I do when I'm working with autoimmunity is I really try to understand what triggered the autoimmune process, and then what is driving the immune response on an ongoing basis that's continuing to perpetuate this state of genetic expression where your body is attacking itself. Why is that happening? Why is that happening? Because it's all through the scientific literature. We know that food proteins, and when they break down, they're metabolized, and they get they let's just say this, they break into pieces, and those pieces break into smaller pieces until they get into the smallest building blocks of the protein, which is called an amino acid. And these proteins, when they break into pieces, they become peptides, or I should say chains, partial pieces of the protein that can sometimes get into the bloodstream and trigger an immune response, and they can, through that immune activation, the immune system can also attack the tissues of your body mistakenly, right? Because that's called molecular mimicry, where something foreign looks like you, and then you make antibodies, which are these tags that stick to the foreign thing to mark it as foreign, so that other immune cells can come behind and destroy it. And sometimes those tags, those antibodies, can stick to your own tissues, marking your tissues for destruction mistakenly, because your tissues look so much like the foreign thing, whether it be a food protein or a pathogen. Many pathogens, bacteria, viruses, fungi, and parasites have been implicated as triggers and perpetuators for the autoimmunity. Chemicals have been shown to be triggers and perpetuators of autoimmunity. So clinically, what we try to do with that autoimmune process that's driving the thyroid destruction, or any autoimmune process, is we want to try to understand, well, what's driving it? What's activating the immune response here? And if we can measure antibodies and see if, like, antibodies are high to a bacteria like Yersinia. There's all kinds of there's so many different triggers, but potential triggers here. But Yersinia is one that's well documented to have the same structure. Okay, so it's the amino acid sequence, which are the building blocks of a protein, and Yersinia is a bacteria, intestinal bacteria. has the same amino acid sequence as thyroid peroxidase, the enzyme inside your thyroid that's responsible for attaching basically iodine to the backbone of your thyroid hormone, the thyroglobulin. And so if your immune system is reacting to Yersinia, for example, and it's making antibodies, those antibodies may be able to attach themselves to the thyroid peroxidase, marking it for destruction, causing you to lose what we call the term, we would say lose self-tolerance. So the body, the immune system no longer recognizes your TPO, your thyroid peroxidase enzyme in the thyroid that's essential for thyroid hormone production as you. And now it's attacking the TPO, mistaking it for the Yersinia because of the similarities in the structure, which is called the molecular structure, and that's called molecular mimicry. They look alike, so the immune system can't tell them apart. So the value is if you can identify in a high antibodies, these are the leading theories, and we see this play out pretty well in clinical practice in most cases. There are actually many theories behind how autoimmunity begins, but this is the one that I think has, which is called this molecular mimicry concept, has the most I think a lot of people recognize it as being valid. There may be other mechanisms, right? This may not be the only thing. So it's important to understand that. But we see this clinically as a great strategy to test the levels of antibodies that show us and can tell us whether or not the immune system is reacting to something, right? Because how do we know if your immune system is reacting to something? Well, we have to measure it, right? At least that's how I do it. And so we would measure antibodies in the blood and screen for these infections or these pathogens, screen for reactivity to these food proteins, screen for reactivity to chemicals, and then once you identify that, you work to remove those from the body, right? Or remove those from the environment to try to get those things out of the body so that the immune system is no longer being exposed to it so it can calm down, right? And then what you do is you repair the damage after that. You try to, because here's the thing. So we know that for example, for autoimmunity to begin or become triggered, that there have to be three things present, right? There has to be a genetic susceptibility. So you have to have a genetic susceptibility. And so many of us, we probably all have a susceptibility to some kind of autoimmune condition. It just depends on if we are exposed to the trigger. So there has to be a genetic susceptibility. There has to be a trigger. So something that initiates the genetic response that causes us to basically end up attacking our own tissues. And then there has to be intestinal permeability, or at least that's what we think. So the barrier system has to be compromised that lets the trigger into the bloodstream, and then we have a genetic susceptibility where our immune system reacts to our own tissues. So three things: genetic susceptibility, a trigger. So triggers, the things we screen for the triggers. That's what we look for clinically. We're looking for bacteria. We're looking for viruses. We're looking for fungi. We're looking for parasites. Okay, we're looking for food proteins that you might be reacting to, partially digested food proteins. We're looking for chemicals, and if we can identify those things, then we can have a very good targets and guidance on what to remove specifically that is unique to your immune system, that your immune system is reacting to. Okay, and so it gives you a roadmap for specific elimination of things, and that sounds pretty simple, in theory, right? You detect and then remove. It's a little bit harder in practice because it's interesting when you see. Just as a side note, when you see, like, for example, someone that has an infection, right? Some type of chronic infection, you check food sensitivities and they will react to everything. Like, I've seen people that have a food sensitivity panel with 180 foods that they're reacting to 75% of those foods. And there's no way they're reacting to all those foods. The infection, though, kind of mobilizes all the troops, so to speak. It activates the immune system very strongly. And then there's a lot of cross-reactivity where the immune system is making all kinds of antibodies to everything that comes into into the bloodstream, and maybe that's coming into the digestive tract. That's where that compromised barrier system comes into play. If it breaks down, you develop like leaky gut, or the if you search in the scientific literature, it's called intestinal permeability. If that occurs, and we believe that that is like one thing that's necessary for autoimmunity to begin, then that compromised or broken down barrier system, then you might react to all the food proteins that you're eating. Start really reacting to a lot of things, and so that makes it more difficult to understand. Well, what do you do first, right? Where do you begin? And you try to overall lower the burden on the immune system, remove as many of those foods as you can without restricting the diet too much, get rid of any infections. So start some kind of antipathogen, antimicrobial protocol. And then, if there are chemicals, you have to typically, try to remove exposure to those. If you can identify a source, it's very difficult to identify a source of chemicals, but you can clean up the environment, clean up personal care products, clean up the water, clean up the air that the person is, being exposed to, and then you address the chemicals typically at a later time after you've addressed potential infections and foods. But it's you also have to typically address nutrient deficiencies, support healing the gut, and use some strategies to help to actually help try and overcome some of the obstacles if there's massive reactivity to a lot of different food proteins. There's several things, different approaches for sure for each person. But this is, clinically what we see is that there have to be three things: genetics, genetic predisposition, a trigger, and then a compromised barrier system. Now, typically leaky gut, but I think that we're going to see that compromised barrier systems can also be leaky lung, right? So the lung, if you don't know this, but your lung is a barrier system, and it is very similar to the intestinal lining. It is a selectively permeable barrier system. So could you be exposed to something in the air that gets into the bloodstream to the lungs and activates the immune response? Sure, absolutely. We know that there are many different allergens, different times of the year, that when someone gets exposed to them, the immune system will make antibodies against these allergens in the air, and the antibodies that are higher in the blood will cause you to react to some foods different time, that are in season during that time of the year, because there's again this mimicry to the allergen in the air and the protein in the food. They're so similar that the antibodies you're making against the airborne allergen, those antibodies actually attach themselves to the proteins in the foods, and you can have reactivity. So you have reactions to melons. There's a lot of different foods that you'll see that happen with. But I think we're going to see that anytime a barrier system's compromised, like the intestinal lining, the leaky lung, the skin. Your skin is a selectively permeable barrier system. You can absorb things transdermally. We're going to see it. I think we're going to uncover more mechanisms, but right now, the most common and kind of like the primary area where we see and we have more evidence for is the intestinal tract and intestinal lining breaking down. So leaky gut, a trigger, and then genetic susceptibility. So you have to, so there's no Hashimoto's medication. There's not one. The approach has to take these things into consideration. What's the trigger? And the thing is, if you can understand what's driving the process or what's driving the immune system, you can put together and tailor a very specific plan. If you can't do that, if that's not an option, then definitely, a lot of people can go a long way cleaning up their diet, improving their lifestyle habits, and using some temporary nutritional supplementation, or maybe supplementation long term. But these are all things that can help to remove potentially inflammatory food proteins. Right? We know there are certain foods that are more likely to cause problems than others, like especially with Hashimoto's, like gluten. There's a hugely increased incidence rate of Hashimoto's in people that have celiac disease, right? And so many people that have celiac disease, by the way, have no idea they have it. They're completely asymptomatic, no symptoms at all. And they have this full-blown intestinal autoimmunity or inflammatory bowel disease that is caused from eating gluten, and they have no idea. like none, because they don't have any GI related symptoms. So that's that's a really significant issue. But there's a greater. We know that gluten plays a role. We know that plays a role for sure. So those are things that you can do. You can definitely remove foods, upgrade the diet. The lifestyle factors, like why would you change lifestyle factors? Well, because those are things that can help with immune system regulatory function, adequate sleep, reducing stress, exercising, which is anti-inflammatory and has a number of health benefits. All these things, feed into better stress hormone physiology, which if you have poor stress hormone physiology, if you're under a lot of stress, emotional stress, physical pain, chemical stress, it will create a scenario where your stress hormones, cortisol, are elevated, and that will impair the regeneration of the intestinal lining, which can uh, lead to leaky gut or intestinal permeability. Could be a gateway, right? Stress. We often see this, like when taking a history and trying to figure out exactly, like, can we figure out a trigger? So when I'm trying to figure out a trigger with someone, like what might have been the thing that initiated this series of events, we really look at history, their health history, and when did things start to go downhill? Was there any type of event that may have occurred, sickness, even? Because if you get sick, maybe there's some kind of infectious trigger. If you were under tremendous stress, maybe that this is the potential mechanism, right? High cortisol over a prolonged period of time diminishes or decreases the GI tract's ability to repair the mucous membrane. Stress creates major issues with thyroid hormone physiology too. So maybe there's poor conversion of T4 to T3. Maybe there's maybe with the elevated stress over a prolonged period of time, the elevated cortisol creates a diminished output of TSH. So the TSH is low, even though the body needs more. Lower, but even though the body needs more. That's a pituitary pattern that can occur where the pituitary gland is affected. So these are all mechanisms that can set the stage for. Then you have poor thyroid hormone physiology, increased stress hormone physiology, and that, if that's prolonged for very long, that can create a scenario where your body starts to break down. Barrier systems start to become compromised, and then the gateway is opened for autoimmunity. So understanding that helps you to understand, like, okay, are these stressors still present? And if they're not, then you want to understand, well, what now continues to drive this process? Because the trigger may be resolved, but now once you become autoimmune, new things can become, like, you start reacting to things. Maybe you develop secondary problems that now are promoting the autoimmune process. It definitely can snowball. And then you want to know, okay, what's perpetuating and driving this now? Get that data together, and then you can formulate a really solid plan. But unfortunately, there's no medication, because these are complex problems, and there's no singular solution for a complex problem, right? So you can have 20 different scenarios, probably far more than that lead to the development of an autoimmune process, or at least this is what we believe in theory, and which does tend to work out pretty well in clinical practice for us when we take this approach. So you got all these different drivers leading to this expression of genetic expression and autoimmunity. So if you have all these different complex drivers, what medication addresses that? Like, none, right? This speaks to the problem of our chronic diseases today, right? Chronic health conditions today. They all have very similar threads here. Okay, very similar threads to what I'm explaining to you. They are diseases of diet, lifestyle, and environmental exposure. Really, lack of good nutrition. It's very interesting today that we have such availability of calories, but nutrient density is not that great in a lot of our fruits and vegetables and whatnot. So we see things. We see things like, for example, and this is a double-edged sword here. So don't take this for me being pro pro iodine or not, against iodine, but iodine levels seem to have been dropping. Well, we know they've been dropping over the past, several decades, and this is likely due to like topsoil depletion and over farming and just farming practices and whatnot that we have had to sustain and maintain to feed everyone. And it's been wonderful in some respects, but in others, it's been there are consequences. To it's kind of like the whole thing with like gluten, right? The issue with gluten, I try not to like demonize gluten because I don't like dislike it, but it's caused, I think it's caused a lot of problems for people. And it's really, we're dealing with different types of, of gluten, of wheat gluten and these proteins than we've ever had before. They've changed since like the 1950s because the wheat has been crossbred and hybridized so that you get greater yields. You get more wheat per acre, right? You get more wheat per acre. So guess what that means? It means you can feed more people, which is pretty awesome, right? I mean, what a great goal scientists and they were, with agriculture that they were trying to accomplish in, the 50s and 60s to increase our yield so that we can help to feed the world. That's a pretty awesome goal, so I don't fault them for it. But some of the consequences of that is that the wheat has changed, the protein has changed, and it appears to be a bit more reactive and creating more problems than it did before. And we technology has helped us advance our ability to feed people, but there are consequences. There are always consequences. So anyway, interesting. It's kind of interesting to contemplate that and think about it. But I think one of the reasons that we're seeing so many of these chronic diseases is not just that we detect these things better. There's no doubt that we do, and that we have better understandings of it. But I will say that I think that we're seeing a lot more chronic diseases and autoimmune conditions because of exposures to all kinds of chemicals, industrial and agricultural chemicals, pesticides, herbicide residues, foods that are prepared, raised in ways that they never were, that change them subtly, or that allow us to consume them at much higher concentrations as far as food proteins go, than the modern lifestyle that is not congruent with human physiology, where we are under chronic stress from, and it's not necessarily perceived as stress, but just light exposure when it's dark outside. You might not think that's stress, but that's different than our physiology, than we've evolved with since pre electricity. Lights, especially light that has blue wavelengths, that's not something that we evolved with. We had fire, which did not have very much blue, and then we had candles, which is fire, which not much blue, and now we have blue everywhere, blue from screens, and so there's so many things that I think affect our genetic expression, that I'm not saying that we cannot evolve with it and that we cannot change and that it cannot be. I'm not saying these things cannot be benefits to us, but they definitely seem to be detrimental in a lot of ways today. Today they do, and they seem to be potentially implicated in driving and triggering a lot of these problems that we're seeing and having, these chronic disease processes. But as we learn more about these problems and these drivers and triggers and things that are creating these negative consequences for us, gives us the ability to make changes so that we can work and maybe thrive with technology rather than it causing our demise, so to speak, or our decline. But there's definitely a lot to consider. So let's see. Hopefully that makes sense. Didn't every doubt son feel worse, begin to eliminate certain groups. Yeah. So Audrey says that she has Hashimoto's and was exposed to mercury while working. I think that says, I've got the icon from this program is coming up. Yeah, in a dental office for 20 years. I've done every dot under the sun. I feel worse when I begin to eliminate certain food groups, I believe. Yeah, Audrey, it's not real clear cut on what to do. You can, there's it's really interesting when you start looking at potential drivers here, or triggers of this stuff. Um, when you look at chemicals, a lot of people, there's this idea that the dose makes the poison, but it's not. That's not exactly how it works. Actually, people can have non-detectable levels of some of these chemicals, like even mercury. Depends on what types of tests you do. There's like blood, urine, feces, hair, that you can do to try to detect chemicals in the body. But a lot of these chemicals can be embedded in tissues. But we all have different tolerances for the chemicals, so it's not that that it's a dose. The dose will be different for every person. But some people will react to mercury, for example, or heavy metals. Some of these heavy metals, and they're not considered high doses. It's just their immune system does not. Their immune system will respond to it. So what I will do is, one of the tests that I'll order is called a chemical immune reactivity panel. It actually looks at the immune responses to chemicals that bind to human tissues, and then also their metabolites if the liver partially metabolizes them. So we're actually looking at immunological reactivity, and not just looking at quantities, because I think you can have a much lower dose and the body lose tolerance to it with you know immunological tolerance, and you actually have antibodies being produced, then so you can have a very low dose basically and have an immune response, whereas that might not be enough to be detected on an excretion or elimination test. Quite frankly, if you do any type of test where there's like chelation involved, and you do like like you take a chelator and something that pulls chemicals out or metals out, you're going to pull them into the bloodstream, and you're going to eliminate more. Almost everybody is, because we're all exposed to them. The question becomes is like, how are you handling that? How does your body handle that particular? And what can you do? And the answers aren't always easy or clear. But I hope that does make some sense. Don't lose hope. I think that what I've done with people when we're dealing with basically trying to improve their biotransformation pathways, which we'll often refer to as like detoxification pathways: phase 1 detoxification and phase 2 detoxification of the liver, and then bile elimination and normal and frequent bowel movements to help with getting that stuff out. When we're trying to do that, before I ever move into those stages with people, I always try to focus on decreasing, like, this is ideal, right? Measuring inflammation and decreasing and removing any particular driver of the inflammatory process, balancing blood sugar, stabilizing blood sugar, and really trying to get the digestive tract as healthy as possible. Because the last thing that you really want to do is pull all this stuff, right? Like let's say you're trying to eliminate and chelate out metals or mercury or something, and you're actively pulling this stuff from the tissues using some kind of chelator. Well, if your body is putting it into the GI tract, then it's going to have to pass out. But if the intestinal barrier is not healthy and is permeable or porous, then you're going to auto-intoxicate and reabsorb some of those things through the intestinal lining back into the bloodstream, especially if you're constipated and the bowels aren't moving well. You're going to just redistribute it somewhere else. And, mercury has a high affinity for areas of high metabolism. So all your organs and glands, it's higher metabolic rate. The brain, highest metabolic rate in the body. Those mercury has a higher affinity for there. So for it, so you don't want to. There's a process that I think is best to take, and it's, you've got to work on some foundational biochemistry first, and there's a lot that you can typically do, and then you can work on active supporting biotransformation pathways or detoxification pathways. And then once you do that, you pulse. The way we do it is we pulse detoxification, so that you pull things out of the tissues, and then the body works to eliminate them, and you run down the reserves of those detoxification organs to some degree. And then you want to stop and let them recover. And then you pulse. That's what you do, on, off, on, off. And I think that's the best way to do it. And it's hard to say how long that takes. I mean, I really recommend that people go through biotransformation or detoxification programs, initially, most cases, 3 months to like a year, pulsing on and off once they start that process. And then periodically doing it, for a month or a few weeks, a time or two a year is probably not a bad idea. Something that I think we need to do is, in our modern world, we have to actively be thinking about detoxification and how do we improve our elimination of chemicals. It's why you'll see some of my videos, I do them. I used to do them in the sauna quite a bit. And now I just kind of try to take that time for myself. But that's a great way. Sweating is a great way to, biotransform, eliminate things from the body, detoxify. And it's also very, very helpful in so many other ways. So many other ways. Hyperthermic conditioning is really what you're doing. You're conditioning your body to higher temperatures, has just amazing health benefits, unbelievable health benefits. So I don't know. I hope that makes some sense. I mean, I know it's not like clear direction on anything, but it's really hard to give clear direction. I mean, definitely trying to get those things out, but there's definitely a process you want to consider. So let's see. Hey, Stevie. Hi, Jen. I'm glad this is helpful. Audrey, what is the most effective way to chelate mercury out of your body? I typically use like a zeolite, which is a form of like volcanic rock. That's what I use. Some doctors will use is it EDTA? There's a few different things that can be used, but I tend to use like a zeolite. There's the one that I like using right now. There's several out there. Is it's what is the name of it? It's like Nano. I think that's the brand. I want to say it's ZRT. It's not. I can't remember the exact brand that I use, but it's like a spray, and it works pretty well. It works pretty well. You just you spray it under the tongue and typically hold it there, and you do that usually for what we'll do in our detoxification program or the biotransformation program is like for 1 month we will focus on supporting the organs of detoxification, so preparing them for the burden of chemicals, of metals that we're going to try to pull out. And then we, after that first month, then we start going on and off every other week with higher doses of like these things that might chelate. And we'll use binders that you'll take, like I'll recommend binders on the weeks that you're doing active, chelating. You'll use a binder because when you're pulling these things out of the body, if they get into the GI tract where we want a lot of them are going to go, we want something there that helps to bind them and keep you from reabsorbing them through the intestinal lining. Does it make sense? So that's the strategy that I'll typically use. And there's all kinds of stuff that you can do, though. I love like ultra baths, like taking different types of baths. So a lot of people are familiar with like Epsom salt baths, but there's a lot of different ways that you can use a bath to help you, similar to a sauna, like with hyperthermic conditioning and detoxification. I'll even use different types of enema therapy. And some people, think that's kind of like crazy or something, but that was like that was in the physician's desk reference, which is like the Bible of like medical treatments. It was in there until like a few years ago, and then they took out enemas. But enemas, when someone's constipated or their bowels aren't moving, I mean, they work extremely well. They work extremely well. And I've had people that have used them very successfully to help with elimination. And as they get healthier, they wean off of it. And it's something that can be a reasonable thing to do. And there's a lot of different types of enema therapy that can be done. It's not something that I have everyone do, but it's definitely something that you shouldn't scoff at and think that it's not reasonable. I think it's actually very beneficial in a lot of cases. I know it is. I mean, I know it's beneficial. I've seen it work. I've done enemas personally, and they've helped me. And so, those are some of the things like I share in like the detoxification program that I put together, is like how to consider using like what I would consider like more advanced techniques, like ultra baths, sauna, enema therapy, and things along those lines to help with encouraging elimination and clearance of things that are in your body that you want to eliminate, right? That you these chemicals and things that you want to get rid of. But I really like saunas too for killing pathogens. Basically, when you are going through like hyperthermic conditioning and heating your body up, your core temperature, you're simulating a fever. So that helps that's why your body that's why you get a fever. I don't know if you guys know that, but your body heats up to kill the bacteria or whatever you are having a response to. So it's actually an intelligent design where it's not something that is, granted, they can be problematic if they're too high for a prolonged period of time, but it's the body's natural response. It's really pretty fascinating. I mean, when you start looking and you even think about things like inflammatory responses, that's the body's natural response to heal you. It's not something that it's doing to hurt you. And sometimes we look at what's happening as if it's this thing that shouldn't be occurring. But in a normal response, that's the body healing itself. And so sometimes things get confusing because we don't know everything about the body. I think we're far from it. You want, my personal approach is to try and rely on the body's wisdom. Let it do what it's going to do. Right. And that's hard to do sometimes. But sometimes that's the only option we have, and try to trust in it to heal us, and let it heal us as it would if you have a cut. You have a cut, it heals itself. It's not always possible, but I think that's the type of wisdom that you have to you have to honor that and try to work with that as much as possible, and not try and think you know more than the body does about how it heals, because we don't know how to do that. We just hope we're helping to get out of its way and assist it to heal itself. But anyway, I want to share this with y'all. I hope this has been helpful. These are really the things, though, that I think that everyone we need to understand, and we need to talk about these kind of concepts here. And like I said, visit the web page that I updated on our website. I posted it in the links, but I go over a lot of the stuff I just actually kind of talked about, and I have so many links to research that will help you to understand some of these things that I'm talking about, because there's so much research that's been done that will show you that, because so many people, when they hear the stuff that I'm talking about, this is stuff I've been exposed to just because I have good teachers. I'm not a researcher. I don't do like laboratory work. I just try to read and get exposed to the research that's being published, and I've have had some good teachers and people that are we're very fortunate to learn from, and I just continuously try to learn from those people, and so there's a lot of brilliant work that's being done. So hopefully I can help to expose you to some of these ideas so that that you're not there's hope for people, because so many people don't feel well, even though there's everything that their doctor says everything's fine or everything looks okay, but they still don't feel well, or they're taking thyroid medications and they don't feel well. And for most of those people, the reason for that is because there are other biochemical processes that are breaking down and not working normally. And that's stuff that, from a classical medicine perspective, or traditional medical education, you learn physiology, how the body works, and then you learn classical pathophysiology, how it breaks. And notice I said classical and you learn, new stuff that gets incorporated, but you got to understand that by the time research makes it into a medical textbook and it's taught in a residency or in clinical, so it can be applied in a clinical practice. The fastest is like 10 years, but really it's like 20 years. So there's only the interconnectedness and how the various systems of the body impact one another. Okay, so how, for example, like low thyroid hormone, how does low thyroid hormone contribute to diabetes? Is there a connection at all? Some of you might have some ideas, but let me give you a potential mechanism here, because this is something that I've definitely seen happen. So your thyroid hormone stimulates the cells of your body to produce energy, pretty much. Okay. The fuel that the cells use to produce the energy is primarily blood sugar, which is glucose, and oxygen. Okay. So diabetes, let's say type 2. Okay. Type 2 diabetes, adult onset, typically believed to be dietary related, right? Lifestyle and diet is when the blood sugar keeps creeping higher and higher and higher. And then your body has to make more and more insulin, the hormone that actually signals the cells of your body to open up, take in that glucose or that blood sugar, and then use it to produce energy or store it as fat. Okay. So if you're hypothyroid, the receptors on the outside of the cell, okay, every cell in your body, the receptors that are sensitive to insulin, right? They lose sensitivity in hypothyroidism. So you have to have more insulin to stimulate those cells to open up and actually take the blood sugar from the bloodstream into the cell so it can be used to produce energy. And then you don't have, if you're hypothyroid, you don't have optimal activation of the cells of the body. So you're not producing energy at an optimal rate. So you're not even burning and utilizing the fuel source, the glucose. So that could create a scenario where you have a buildup of glucose, right? And then that could lead to higher insulin, and higher insulin leads to insulin resistance and higher blood sugar over time and diabetes diagnosis. Interestingly, people that are also hypothyroid, diabetics that are hypothyroid, they don't need as much insulin. They don't metabolize their insulin as quickly. So their doses tend to be lower because they're not breaking down the insulin. So the insulins last longer. It's lasting longer. So they don't take it at its high of a dose because the body's not clearing it or utilizing it as quickly. This all leads to insulin resistance, diabetes, and really a very unfavorable scenario. And you think about this, how many people think they have just type 2 diabetes and the doctor checks their TSH alone, their thyroid hormone alone? And it's really important we talk about things like diabetes too, because this is such a huge problem. Like I just looked at this news report. It was on my phone, like maybe it was today. And I think it was last night. It was last night because I remember it was a map of the United States, and it showed all these different states, all the states of the U.S., and they were color coded, and it was like blue to like different shades of red, and darker red were the percentage of people that were obese, and it was like I think it was Alabama had like the highest amount, and they were talking about how something like 35 to 45%, like astronomical number of people are obese right now, and how many people. Man, there's so many mechanisms to obesity, so many. But this one thing that we're talking about here with like poor thyroid hormone physiological stimulation or hypothyroidism, right, of the cell, causing you to not be as sensitive to insulin. So insulin builds up, blood sugar builds up. You don't degrade or break down insulin as fast. So insulin is persists longer, which would may contribute to more resistance because it's persisting longer. So you're getting more longer exposure to it. It's not being utilized efficiently. How many of those people, how many people out there probably have some kind of impairment, diminished ability to utilize their thyroid hormone, or they have poor thyroid hormone physiology? Because remember, it's not just quantity, right? So anytime we're talking about any hormone, but let's stay on the thyroid, there are 4 phases of hormonal physiology. There's production of the hormone. So that's the quantity by itself. But then there's the second stage of the hormone physiology is transportation. So the gland, whatever gland we're talking about, whatever hormone we're talking about, it's made by the gland. And then that hormone has to be transported through the bloodstream to the cells where it's utilized. And so the transportation mechanism can break down. And then there's sensitivity at the cell, which we're talking about now with insulin, right? We're talking about if there's poor thyroid hormone levels or poor thyroid hormone stimulation of the cell, then the receptors on the outside of the cell do not respond to insulin. So you can't get blood from the bloodstream into the cells efficiently, right? So it builds up, insulin builds up, and so that's a sensitivity issue. That's an example of insulin. And then there's detoxification and elimination, degradation, breaking down, and clearing the hormones. All hormones have to be detoxified. So there's production, transportation, sensitivity, and detoxification. So with diabetes, how many people out there may have like high inflammatory levels, which is by far the most common problem that I see in people that I work with. It doesn't matter what condition they have. It's inflammation for sure is the most common problem. How many people probably have like increased inflammatory load for whatever reason, bunches of reasons for that are impairing and diminishing their body's ability to be responsive to thyroid hormone, that is then causing them to build up insulin and blood sugar in the bloodstream. That's like one of the major mechanisms for them to have diabetes. And they're told you just need to diet and exercise. And they're dieting and exercising, and they're having really poor responses. It's because there's other mechanisms at play, right? And then, I mean, when you get into diabetes, I mean, you can talk about all kinds of stuff here because these endocrine disrupting chemicals in our environment are unbelievable. Unbelievable. So there's a ton of mechanisms. I've done numerous videos on diabetes and blood sugar where I go in and I delve into these topics a bit more. But this is why you have to look at the whole person. It's just, you have to look at the whole person. And I say that, and I don't say that like I'm somehow better than other people, because I'm definitely not. Like your doctors and stuff. Listen, when you go to in the United States, and I mean really the other countries as well, the classical approach is limited based on the approach that the doctor's trained in taking. And in the United States, especially, doctors are limited by what they can do, what tests they can order. Even if they have interests in like what I'm talking about with you now, they are limited by what insurance companies will cover. And they have a responsibility not to order testing that will not be covered by the insurance company, or that is considered not necessary by the insurance company based on treatment guidelines and what's called the standard of care. So there are a lot of limitations in practice. So your doctors cannot do the things that I'm telling you. They don't have the freedom to do that. And many of them, the model of care does not fit into the insurance reimbursement model either, because of the amount of time that it takes to review those tests and then deliver the results to you and then help you put together a strategy. Because remember, most of these problems don't have medications, right? So coming back to, is there a medication for Hashimoto's? No, there's not, because it's complex. They're complex problems. Many different problems can end up with the same symptoms and similar outcome. So you have to look at these things. And step back and say, what else is happening to this person? How could these problems be contributing to the genetic expression of this process? And then how do we unwind this? So that is how it works, at least in my mind. Oh, yeah. Stevie Lynn says, hey, my husband pays $800 a month for our insurance. I should be able to get every test available. Dude, I know. I know. You should, but it's like it's all based on the what your insurance considers medically necessary. I think that it's interesting here. This is what's pretty cool. There is a trend I'm seeing a little bit where some self-insured plans can say, hey, I want that stuff covered, like what I'm talking to you here about, like this type of care, and they can get coverage for it. They can. Some companies will do that, but they have to see really. You have to have someone that believes in this approach, and it's not really. The proof is in the pudding. If the problem that I see is that the masses of people, well, first of all, they're not really aware of what I'm talking about. First of all, they're not even aware. They don't know what they don't know, right? They're what we call unconsciously incompetent. They don't know what they don't know. So how can they have, that's why all these videos and us talking about this and you talking about this to your friends and you trying to share different perspectives on health is really important. These companies don't know this stuff. They don't even know that this might be beneficial. And then they're not sure that investing in it's going to have a good outcome, because guess what? This stuff is really hard to determine efficacy or effectiveness, right? Is it effective? Is it cost effective? Because it's hard to do a study around a systems biology or systems based approach like I'm sharing here, like a functional medicine based approach. It's hard to do that because how do you, all these research studies that are typically done and published in journals, they get all these people together that have similar problems, and then they do like one intervention. They give them one chemical or one medication, and then they look at individual biomarker outcomes. Okay, well, try to take 100 people that all have their own unique mix of drivers of the immune response and all different deficiencies and all different stressors, and get a uniform group of people. Good luck. Good luck. You can't do that. You just can't do it. And then there's no one thing. There are smart people that can put together studies. They'll figure it out. But it's still, the proof is in the pudding. There's plenty of people. Just have, if the issue is compliance, though, that's the challenge, right? It's way easier to take a medication and see an outcome, but it's not working on root cause. You're not working on addressing the driver of the process. You're just forcing physiology on the body to change something you don't like. And yeah, you might lower blood pressure and protect your cardiovascular system. Yeah, that's legit, but you're not treating cause. There's no free lunches in physiology. You can take stuff and push chemistry on the body, but there will always be a swing in the other direction somewhere. You're depleting something else. You're doing something else. There always is. The problem becomes getting people to, hey, how are you going to get the people that need to do this to eat the right foods, right? How can you make it affordable for some people? I mean, listen, it's not always easy to eat whole foods. I mean, how much easier is it to go through a dollar menu and load up on, 5,000 calories for a family of 4 people than it is to go to the grocery store and shop and buy vegetables, which you get bulk, but you might get like bulk. I mean, you're going to get, the food has more bulk to it than like a hamburger that might be like, so big that has 1,200 calories for just the burger, versus a huge plate of broccoli that has like 50, right? So there's a lot of barriers that we have to figure out how to overcome. But compliance, and then like our transformation challenge that we put together, so it shows you how to do all that stuff. We give you meal plans, we give you foods to eat and avoid lists, we give you shopping lists, all those things, but you have to make change is hard for people, right? So how do you get the masses of people to get them in a position where they can get the foods they need? They get them to cook it, get them to prepare it, get them to put it into containers and take it to work every day, get them to be motivated, get them to follow through, give them resources. How do you make nutritional supplementation that could be, $200, $250 for a month, how do you get that into their hands and make that available to them? I've seen that. That's a barrier. I mean, that's one of the reasons, okay, I get it. Like I've worked with people from all backgrounds. People don't understand that. Like I've worked with people from all backgrounds. Like people will tell me, like, you don't think I've seen it. I've seen it. Okay. My first real patient that I worked with, and I've told the story before. She lived in in poverty, in serious poverty. I'm not going to get into all the details, but she lived in serious poverty, had no money to do anything. Everything we did was like pro bono in the office. And she came to a talk that I was at. I've told the story once before, but she came to a talk that I was at, and I was actually on fibromyalgia. And the whole thing with fibromyalgia, I'm just going to tell you straight up, I don't agree with fibromyalgia as a diagnosis, because it's just a description of symptoms. It is absolutely not a biochemical explanation for what's happening to a person. And again, there's a ton of different mechanisms that may lead to the amplification of pain, or perception of amplification of pain. And so I went and talked to this group about all these different mechanisms, very similar to what we're talking about here. Inflammation, how it can lead to increased sensitization. Trauma can lead to increased plasticity of neurological pathways that amplify the perception of pain or the sensitivity of pain nerves, and all kinds of stuff. We can get into all kinds of stuff here with that discussion. But she was there, and she was like slumped over and just tattered clothes, dirty clothes, looked just, just really, really bad. And anyway, long story short, I talked to her daughter who was there. She started coming into the office, and we got her eating from a food pantry. Food was all donated, and we just did like what she could do. Like, she was gluten free, went dairy free. We got what supplements that she could afford. I don't remember if we did any actually, but doing the right foods, the right lifestyle things, and turned her life around. Absolutely turned her life around. Over years, but within 6 to 9 months, major differences. And then over years, like 80 pounds and just a different person today. Awesome lady, really determined. That's one thing that I've noticed. It's interesting. And then I worked on the other spectrum with people that it's like any test, anything that they need, they get done. And whether or not that's a priority thing or it's just an access to resources, they get what done that that I recommend, and they'll get everything done, and they can afford everything. But the major factor is motivation. It's motivation, because I have seen people, and I kid you not, whenever I'm working with someone that's autoimmune, you could do $10,000 in diagnostic testing if we were going to try to just like, what all can we do, and let's do every bit of it. You could gather a ton of data, and I've seen people do that and then not take the information and make any changes with it, like literally not make any changes with it. And then I've seen people that have no resources that will do everything and persist. Now, some of that may be just like brain chemistry, and it may be actually the inability to follow through and make decisions and do things can be a manifestation of the biochemical environment and the disease process that the person is living with. So it's like, how do you help that person, right? So what you always have to do is, part of the process that I work with is trying to talk to the person and let them know that I'm okay with them, like, and with their insecurities, and it's okay if they fail, right? But let's try to come up with a plan where we can implement and actually make a reality for them, right? Because I would rather someone tell me, I can't do a particular dietary approach, but I'll eliminate gluten 100%, and I'll take every vitamin that you tell me to take, and I'll do it on a regular basis. Okay. If that's all we can do, that's all we can do. But that's that, and that may be enough. It's you just don't know. You don't know for sure. But anyway, I digress a bit here, kind of off track a bit. But these are the things that we have to consider, and the things that I think are most helpful, and hopefully will give you some ideas and direction and hope too, because so many people out there just don't feel good, and they don't have any clue why. And that's okay. There's some reason. Like I believe, like, if you don't feel well, there's a reason for it. Listen to your body. Believe what you feel. Like, I'll believe you. I never don't believe someone. They tell me that there's something going on. I always believe them. And I trust what they're telling me. I don't, if they say they don't feel well, let's try to figure out exactly what's going on. But I see so many times people not feeling well with thyroid issues. They still don't feel well, even though everything's normal. What the doctor says, all your labs look fine. They still don't feel well. They may still not have energy. They may not be able to lose weight. All these issues that are still there. There's something going on. Now, might you be handling your dietary strategy incorrectly? Sure, that's okay. That's okay. If you're knowledgeable in that, if you work with someone that's knowledgeable in dietary strategy, even like calories, right? But I don't I don't like to like look at calories by themselves. I like to understand biochemistry, because if your biochemistry is all screwed up, you're not going to be able to produce energy, and you're not going to be able to burn calories. So looking at calories first before you understand biochemistry is a problem. It's a problem. You really, in an ideal situation, you want to understand the underlying biochemistry so that you can have an understanding of, oh, okay, the reason that you're obese and one of the reasons that you can't lose weight is because this biochemistry is so messed up that there's obviously problems with energy production at the level of the cell. So let's work on optimizing these things, and then the weight loss and all those other things that are going on will tend to improve. You just basically try to address what you find, all right, and optimize the person's health and physiology. But that's how I do it. So anyway, hopefully this has been helpful. I've been rambling for a while now, but you can always come back and check these out. But if you guys get a chance, yeah, definitely check out thyroidprogram.com. Our transformation program closes. The enrollment for this third class closes tomorrow, probably at midnight. And then check out our new post on our page, on our Dr. Brad Shook page. I've posted them in the comments here, so you can check those out. But you'll learn a lot from those resources. And I tried to link to a lot of things so that you could get more information on specific topics if you were interested in it. But let's see what else. What else is going on? Stevie Lynn says macros. Yeah, I like macros. I like using macronutrients as far as looking at a way to understand your caloric intake. Because I'm really one of my favorite things to do, and really what got me interested in health in the first place was exercise and fitness and lifting weights. Because I remember I was 12 years old, and I was taller and skinny, tall and weak, and thin, and eating things that many of you have probably never heard of, because I am in the South after all, and eating gravy on all kinds of stuff. You just wouldn't believe what I grew up eating, and just nutrition was I ate food and it had calories, but definitely it could have been better. And then there was a convenience store not far from my house, like I could actually walk to it. So it was like a gas station, not too far. And some of my friends in the neighborhood, we would get on our bikes, we'd ride up there, and we would take change anything that we had, and you could buy all this junk food on go into the candy aisle, and there's all this junk food in these bins on the bottom, and it was like a nickel, like 5 cents or something. And we would load up on all this junk food, and we'd come home and play video games. And I'm just so lucky that I have had the influences I've had in my life, because I would have been things, you look back at points in your life and you could say, man, that could have so been me, so many different ways that the road could have forked, and I could have gone down a different path for so many reasons. A lot of it is just pure luck. I don't attribute it to my good judgment at all, because it's probably not that. It's a lot of it's just luck and influence, people in my life. But I would just eat all kinds of stuff, all kinds of junk food and candy. And I remember I was 12, and my cousin's boyfriend was a personal trainer at Gold's Gym. And I got this weight bench. I wanted this weight bench because I was tired of being so weak. And I wanted to look better. Right? I was 12. I was starting to get interested in girls, I think, anyway. I can't remember back that far. And I remember he wrote up the first workout routine for me. And I was so pumped about that. And that's when I actually started learning a lot about bodybuilding. Not that I'm a bodybuilder, but I was learning all about exercise and fitness. And I read all kinds of books on nutritional supplementation. And this would have been in what would that have been? Like 19, what? The late 80s, probably. Yeah, the late 80s. And I was reading all these books and all the bodybuilding magazines. And I read them for years and years and years. And then that was what I was really interested in. And that was how I thought I would get health. And I also saw a lot of sickness around me, family and friends and people that were obese and struggling with all kinds of problems. And that was what led me into health and fitness. And then I pursued that for years. I was studied exercise and fitness, and became a certified personal trainer through the National Strength and Conditioning Association. Eventually became a strength and conditioning specialist through the National Strength and Conditioning Association. Very difficult, certifications to attain. High standards for those tests. Strength and conditioning was all great. I mean, I loved all those classes, and I loved learning those things because I was looking at optimization of health. And anyway, that kind of led me down this path. But the macronutrients, yeah, moon pies, Misty, that's funny. Moon pies. I didn't really like moon pies as much because they had like the marshmallow. I didn't like those, but my dad would get, what would he get? He would get those, what are they? Oatmeal cookies, right? The cookies that had like cream in the center, whatever, the oatmeal cookies. Oh my God, he would have those. We knew nothing about nutrition, like nothing. He would have those like loaded up in the cabinet, and I would eat those things. I was so unhealthy, man. I was so unhealthy. The sugar and whatever, all the stuff. But all those things kind of led me down this path. The macronutrients. Yeah, studying all that stuff, and then experimenting with myself. I mean, I've exercised with cardiovascular training, weight training, you name it, like stretching, yoga, at least to some degree. I don't do like yoga on a regular basis, but all kinds of different training and studying that. You start and then starting to understand and learn hormonal physiology and all these things, like having to deal with autoimmunity. Actually, my autoimmunity really started when I was doing weight training, and I was using. There were several different triggers. Stress was one, not sleeping, but I was using a particular a supplement of it was actually a pre-exercise supplement. It was called like a pre-training supplement that you would take, and it had high levels of arginine in it. And if you don't know what arginine is, it's an amino acid. And bodybuilders have known for probably 35 years now, if you take arginine at high doses, it causes vasodilation. So it makes your veins dilate so you can get better blood flow to the muscles. You recover faster. Your workouts feel amazing. They quite frankly do. But arginine drives some biochemistry that can cause tissue destruction and inflammation. And I'm pretty sure that's what it did to me. There were so many red flags, but again, just dumb and not knowing what I was doing to myself. Not dumb, but just, well, kind of dumb, actually. Yeah, I would say dumb, because I would take some of these pre-training supplements and literally have within 30 minutes, like mucousy stools. And then to continue doing that for probably like 3 months was pretty dumb. But again, probably like 25 or so. That's how old I was. You don't think about, I didn't think about those things. I joke about it. I'm not going to joke. I'm not going to joke about it, but right now, or even repeat the jokes, but I had a buddy who was doing the same thing, and it affected him the same way. So I'm like, well, it's like coffee, right? Some people would drink coffee and it might irritate, it acts as an irritant, and they move their bowels, like a laxative effect. And I thought it was kind of like that, but I don't think that's exactly what was happening, because of the arginine, the caffeine. The supplement was blue. Like, so when you mix it up, it made like this, like it looked like, some kind of blue Kool-Aid or something. So it had all kinds of stuff in it that was like a balm for my body. And that's when I started getting psoriasis. That was right around that time, and my gut was a wreck. And then it took me a long time to recover, but I didn't know what was, if I knew then what I knew now, or if I knew then, what I know now, I would have probably been far more successful and much more rapid at figuring out what to do. But that all kind of led me down this path, and I use macronutrients. What a tangent, just mentioning something like macros. will take me on. I use macronutrients as part of the way that I look at tracking calories and energy intake. And I really love that strategy because if you understand macronutrients and you understand how to set your proteins, your fats, and utilize variation in your carbohydrates in combination, well, just know that it can set you free of all diets in my mind. At least, if you have autoimmunity and there's certain foods that you shouldn't eat, or that if when you do eat, they make you feel bad, or you have immunological reactivity to foods, then you would want to remove those as well, or you'll drive an inflammatory process that will impair your hormonal sensitivity and hormonal physiology. But the macronutrients, if you know those things and you understand your macronutrients, it can set you free of diets. I love it. I mean, I use MyFitnessPal every single day. That's how I track my caloric intake, and it works extremely well for me. Now I match that with my exercise and fitness, and I change primarily my carbohydrate intake based on my body composition goals and the type of training that I'm doing. But that's like, those are things that I'm putting that together in so I have I've created two different programs. I've created the Transformation Challenge, which is the foundational program for people that have like Hashimoto's or autoimmunity or thyroid issues. That it can be very, very helpful at improving the overall physiology. You don't even have to have any of those problems, and it will help a ton of people because it focuses on decreasing inflammation, balancing blood sugar, and improving gut and GI function, GI health. I mean, so many people have GI tract dysfunction. It's crazy. And then the second program is the detoxification program, which I mentioned earlier. And then the third program, which I'm close to being done, it's taking a lot of time, is actually going to be energy and weight loss program. And it's focused on macronutrients and understanding foods that you can and cannot eat, and understanding how to vary your macronutrients over a 1-year period and match that with exercise and conditioning based on body composition goals over a 1-year period. People fail with diets because they don't understand that all diets have to change. You cannot have the same diet forever. You will fail for sure, 100% of the time, if you're expecting to continue you lose weight and you do the same thing over and over. You have to understand that calories have to go up, and carbohydrates need to go up and down and vary. Now, some people might argue and say, no, I'm going to be keto for life. Okay, well, it depends on what your goals are and why you're doing it. Okay, and that's fine, but I'll show you very effective strategies. I know this stuff pretty well, when it comes to like body composition and understanding what to do from a training perspective. I've lived this stuff. I've made it my life for years and years before I ever got into functional medicine. It's always been my passion initially, is exercise and fitness, because I love to feel good. I like to be able to move. I like to feel strong. I like to have energy when I want to do something. So those are probably more information than you want to know, but my childhood was interesting. So anyway, okay, thanks, Stevie. Thanks. I appreciate that. Anyway, I appreciate y'all. Listen, I have probably put half y'all to sleep, but hopefully you have drifted off into a deep sleep, and you can always come back to this later if you want to watch it. But I'm going to sign off too. It's way late, like 11:40 is ridiculous for me here. But I'm going to get to bed. But I do appreciate y'all. I hope you'll have a wonderful night. Hopefully my rambling was okay and you got something valuable from this. Do remember, if you want to join the Transformation Challenge, it's going to close Sunday, tomorrow, about this time. And then check out our new post on our website, which I posted a link here, but it covers all kinds of stuff. Highly referenced. I think you guys will really enjoy it. But I do appreciate you. If you have any questions, comments, please let us know. And hope y'all have a wonderful day. Talk to you soon.